what's up, all my wonderful friends? I just wanted to do a video here for some basic primary quarter note and eighth note rock patterns for some of my friends out there. One of my friends in particular, Andrew, aka Tapering. In addition to any other aspiring drummers out there that are kind of just exploring the kit, learning patterns, learning how to count, learning how to read, that kind of thing. So we're just going to go through some basic and primary rock patterns here. We're playing eighth notes on the hi-hat. Whether we're playing on the hi-hat or the ride, we refer to it as our ride pattern. But I'm also going to show you how you can take the same patterns and the same note values, what we're playing as far as what's happening on the bass drum and snare, and then turn those into sixteenths too, okay? So then that way you can practice the same exact patterns either with eighth notes or with 16th notes. Okay? So, number one, we call it our primary pattern. And yes, a little bit of reverb on the kit now. With this, we're going to be playing 1 and 3 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the snare, eighth note pattern with your dominant hand. And I'm not sure, Andrew, if you're right-handed or left-handed. I think you said you're right. But when you're playing right-handed, right hand goes over left. Okay? We call this playing crossed. We call this playing open. So if your hands are over one another as a right-hander, you're playing in crossed position, left hand on the snare, right hand on the hi-hat. If you're a left-hander and playing on a right-handed kit, then you play open and you play left-handed lead, left hand on the hi-hat, right hand on the snare. Okay? So, just up to you. I still don't know if you're right or left-handed, but I'll show both ways of playing it so that regardless if you're right or left-handed, it'll make sense, okay? So again, our primary pattern, 1 and 3 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the snare. We call that our backbeat. So those are your numbered beats or your down beats, beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're just counting to 4 because we're not any smarter than that as drummers, right? Okay, anyway, so that's what we're doing is we're counting to 4. We're putting beats 1 and 3 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the snare, stacking it with an eighth note pattern up here. The reason they're called stacked patterns is because if you look on the page of music that you have, Andrew, the notes are written stacked on top of each other, right? Where your X's is your eighth note with your right hand on the hi-hat. And underneath the X, you're going to see right on beat 1, you've got the bass drum and that first X stacked together. That's beat 1, right? So we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Exactly 8 eighth notes in one measure of music. Beats 1 and 3 on the bass drum would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now you notice that there's space in there between the bass drum, right? That's where the snare goes on 2 and 4. You want to count it out, okay? Make sure practice speed is always slow. Practice that touch. I'm playing the back of the stick. That's what I mean by playing the back of the stick, Andrew. If you watch my hand, how I'm not guiding the front of the stick down like this, or even like this with my wrist. I'm flicking the stick down with my fingers, the back of the stick. That's where all the control is at. That's where you can go faster and with less effort, okay? Because the front of the stick will follow what you put into the back of the stick. So that's what I meant by the bouncing of the ball motion. That's your bouncing of the ball right there. Okay, so see how I'm letting the stick flick back up into my hand rather than guiding it back up into my hand each time? That's the motion that you're going for, okay? That's going to really determine your feel. So we're not bashing it. We're not doing a power stroke with our arm every time that we're doing it. Yes, you want to develop that for when you mean to play harder. We call them dynamics. You can think of volume. But you want to practice that touch and good feel. Anyone can kind of just probably like bashing quarters, rock drumming, that kind of thing. Or maybe not anyone, but you know what I mean. But you want to work on that touch because that's going to prevent injuries. It's going to allow you, it takes the ceiling off of your playing so that you can then play faster, more articulate, more evenly. Every note value will sound nice and arranged and organized rather than kind of start, stop kind of feel. So that's what I mean by working on your feel with it, okay? So you want to count your note values. I'll count us off here. And then this is what your primary pattern sounds like. This primary pattern is so important. Just practice it over and over and over. Get it into your muscle memory, because once you do, the entire universe of drums expands off from there, okay? So we're going to start with our 8th note pattern up here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2. Once you get comfortable with that after a little bit, make sure it's in your hands, you know, where 2 and 4 fall together. Because the only thing that changes with that whole page, Andrew, is where you're placing the bass drum, okay? But see how I can speak, I can give directions, I can talk while I'm playing it, just because I have it in my muscle memory, and I've worked on just getting that into my hands, and then fitting in the space with my foot. And you want to make sure you're counting your note values. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, until you don't have to count it anymore. But at first, you want to be very deliberate. You want to practice either do a click or do a song, but I do recommend practicing these patterns by themselves first before you put them to a song. It's really important because you want to practice slow, medium, and fast tempos with it. So once you get this in your hands a little bit, then speed it up a little bit. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Then you can just count your quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then after you get it kind of at a comfortable playing tempo, this is about medium tempo right here. Have fun going to the ride. Into each other as you play, right? So you want to make sure that you got a good sense of where your hands are going to come up at the same time for 2 and 4. That's how you avoid hitting your sticks together. See how both my hands are raising on 2 and 4? That'll help you to avoid hitting your hands, okay? Or hitting your sticks together, clicking your sticks together. In addition to how far out you move your right hand. So you could move your right hand out a little bit further here so you have some more space to work with. But you want to be comfortable and you want to get used to trying to always hit the same spot in the center of the drum, unless you're going for more overtones or a lighter sound and what we call ghost notes, Andrew, or anyone out there. So I'm sure you heard me kind of add those. Those are called ghost notes. What they are is any beats that come before or after beats 2 and 4, so that you're adding some extra elements on the snare. We call them embellishments. But what you're doing is you can just first do single strokes, patterns like that. Those are considered ghost notes as well. But a lot of ghost notes, what you'll do is you'll play more towards the rim, towards the outside of the snare. And then you'll move to the center of the snare for your accents, or for a rim shot, where you're getting a louder sound out of your drum. That's what's so cool about snare drums, is that you can get so many different sounds out of them. All sorts of cool stuff you can do. All sorts of sounds. Anyway, back to the point of what we were playing. Play the back of the stick with both hands, okay? You want to make sure both your hands are looking the same. You don't want to have one in French position or upside down, right? While one's in matched or German position, palms down. You want to focus on having that good technique no matter where you go. Because what you're doing is just all wrist and finger motions on any surface you get to. You're just moving your arms to get to that surface. Or moving your angle. Rotational angle is what you're actually doing. But when you get to that surface, you want to use that same motion of wrist and fingers when you get there. Okay? So, back to our pattern. Our primary pattern of 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. That pattern is the groove. A lot of times we're like, oh, it's so basic when we're first learning it. But the more and more you evolve your playing, the more and more you realize how important and how foundational that one groove is. It's so important. It's very important. So, you're counting your eighth notes. You've got pattern 1 down. That's great. Another pattern that you had on your sheet is you said that went to a 2 feet song. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, what it was 1 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. A little faster. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. To the right. 1 and 3. 1 Okay, so that's just giving you an example of taking it from slow to medium to fast. Now, a good thing too is you want to kind of stop in between those tempo shifts. I know I just gradually went faster, but the thing is that if you tend to practice like that, you tend to practice not staying in that exact beats per minute or whatever your tempo is for slow, medium, and fast tempo. So if you gradually practice like going faster to slower, sometimes that's not the best idea at first because it makes your time variable, where it gives you kind of a sense of rushing and dragging with your patterns rather than staying put at that exact beats per minute for, I don't know, at least like a couple minutes. Then stop, give yourself a little rest, then move up the beats per minute by 5 to 10 clicks, that kind of thing. Then practice at that tempo. Couple minutes, at least a couple minutes. Then stop again, then kick it up a notch again, that kind of thing. So that way, you're getting used to what each tempo spectrum sounds like and feels like, so that you're not rushing or dragging within each of those tempos, okay? So it is, once you get a sense of playing slow, medium, and fast tempos, then yeah, you can just kind of gradually accelerate your tempo as you get warmed up. But just to let you know that that's an important element, because a lot of students that'll practice, going faster, 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 then they get into the habit of that and they don't have a good sense of where each feel is at for slow, medium, and fast tempos, okay? So I highly, highly recommend just staying and relaxed. Now, even when you're playing faster, it's all up-down motion, but the way that you're able to keep that motion going is by that good technique using the tip of the stick and playing the back of the stick. And no, I don't mean playing the back of the stick like this, you silly goofball. But even if you do, yes, you still can, but you're still playing the back of the stick. It's going to give you a fatter snare sound for sure. Right? hear the difference right away. But what I mean by that is playing the back of the stick as in playing the back of the stick like this. And you know that, okay? So that's why I say practice speed is always slow, because you want to get everything into muscle memory first before you try to rush to, oh, how fast can I play? I know a lot of people are first impressed by, oh, wow, that's such a cool fill, or how fast can you play it? That kind of thing. That's great at first, exploring with it, but what's going to bring you that speed, articulation, cleanliness, and being able to keep it sustained, because that's a whole nother thing. It's like, yeah, you can play fast maybe, but how long can you play fast for, right? Is it like half a second where you're just, okay, I did it, that kind of thing? Or can you keep it sustained? Right? That's a whole nother element. So you want to make sure that you're practicing relaxed so that you can get it up to faster tempos, but it's still the same up-down motion, still the same technique. That's why you want to stay relaxed even while going faster. And that's completely counterintuitive at first, because it's like when you run, right, or if you're trying something harder, it's like, okay, more muscle, more strength, more power, more, where it's the complete opposite with drums. Are you going to have to put a little bit more strength into it? Yeah, as you go faster, yeah. But it's really not a strength thing. It's a technique thing, 100%. I'm not a strong dude by any means, okay? What it is, and the reason I can play for as many hours as I do a day is because I'm using technique and I'm using touch, and I'm letting the sticks do the work for me. If I was using all muscle and big movements and shoulder and elbow movements for everything I played, my body'd be completely destroyed by now, 100%. I mean, I'm already like, I could sometimes in the week barely keep up how many hours I'm playing in a week, even with good technique. So I can only imagine if I was just, back, all that kind of stuff. If I was playing like that every day, oh my goodness, there's no way I'd be able to do it. So anyway, back to that pattern of 1 and 3, 1 and 3. So see how I'm breaking it up, Andrew and anyone else out there who's watching this video, between just the bass drum and the snare, or maybe just the bass drum and the hi-hat, or maybe just my hands between the hi-hat and the snare, because the brain is trying to turn these three different things into one thing, right? You got your left hand doing one thing, you got your right hand doing one thing, and you got your bass drum foot doing another thing. And then adding your left foot into the equation is a whole nother element, which makes it a little more difficult. So, it's like keeping quarters over here while you're playing over here. That kind of thing. And then eighth notes wherever else. So for now, we're just going to leave that left foot out of it, so to kind of simplify things, all right? But that's a great pattern, Andrew, and that's in a lot of music. And knowing, because it's number 3, I believe 3 and 7 on your page that you have. And Lindsay and anyone else out there, basically what I'm referring to is the rock patterns page that I showed in my previous video. It was the lesson video for Lindsay and any other aspiring readers on that page. Andrew has a copy of a very similar page. And basically what I'm describing is the difference between 1 and 3, 1 and 3, and then 1, 3 and, 1, 3 and. So they're very similar, but they're off by just 1/8 note. Hear the difference? Back to the other. This is 1 and 3. 1 and 3. The other is 1, 3 and. 1, 3 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So they're very similar, but you have to make sure you know which one you're playing. Hear the difference now again? Now again, listen. See, it's only 1/8 note difference. it's just those two patterns alone, for everyone out there, but Andrew specifically, those two patterns alone are in so much music. And right now we're just playing eighth notes in the bass drum because we're going to get to 16th notes in the bass drum eventually here, okay? And so speaking of 16th notes, I wanted to show you two. Now that we've gone over three patterns, okay, that's what we're going to keep it at for today. First primary pattern of 1, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, that's our very first pattern. Our second pattern is 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? Then our third and our final pattern for this video is 1, 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so those are our three as far as the bass drum and snare, and what we're counting within our eighth notes. Either number 1 pattern is just quarter notes in the bass drum, and then number 2 pattern and number 3 pattern we have eighth notes in the bass drum. Okay, but it's just counting your syllables of what you're playing up here. I like to think of my right hand, because I'm right hand dominant, as my metronome hand. As long as this stays consistent, everything else falls underneath this. If this is starting, stopping, right? It's like, how do you organize the rest of what's going to be as your quarter notes or eighth notes on the bass drum and snare? So this, beyond anything else, has to remain consistent, because everything else is going to fall underneath that. So as long as you have a good feel, a good sense of time, practice it to a click if you can. Okay? We don't want you to become a robot, but at the same time, when you're first practicing to a click is crucial. It'll develop your sense of time without speeding up and slowing down. Okay? So with those three patterns, that's playing it with eighth notes. Now I'm going to show you, Andrew, and those of you out there who are also watching this video, of how to do it with 16th notes, okay? Same exact patterns, but now we're counting 16th notes with our ride pattern. Whether you're playing it on the hi-hat or the ride, remember I'm going to refer to it as our ride pattern. We're going to be playing now one-handed 16ths, which the difference between single stroke 16ths and one-handed 16ths, okay? So think back to like lesson 7, everyone. I know I refer to lesson 7 a lot, but Andrew, you're familiar with it. Lindsay, you're familiar with it. Lesson 7, that's what you're doing, is single stroke 16ths. Okay, that exercise, and then getting it up faster, obviously. Okay, so that's what I'm referring to as single stroke 16ths. So you want to count your syllables with this, guys, because once you get eighth notes into your muscle memory, the tendency is that because there's 2 eighth notes for every 1 quarter note, right? 1 and, 2 beats per 1 quarter note for eighth notes. So you're playing 1 and, or and, 3 and, 4 and, 2 notes per 1 downbeat with eighth notes. With 16th notes, you're now playing 4 notes that pass by up here before you get to the quarter notes on 2 and 4 or 1 and 3, that kind of thing, okay? So count your syllables. 16th note syllable count. One-handed 16ths is 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and okay? Because the tendency, once you play eighth notes, you're going to want to play, right? 1 and 2. But with 16ths, that's not the case. It's 1 E and 2. 1 E and 2. See, so there's more notes passing by up here before you get to your quarter notes or eighth notes on the bass drum and snare, okay? So you can take that exact same page, and instead of practicing it with eighth notes, just turn them into 16ths. So pattern number 1, still 1 and 3 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the snare. 16th notes now, though, up here on the hi-hat, okay? I'll count us off, nice and slow. Use that touch. Let the stick do the work for you. And you don't want to be bashing. You want to play with touch, especially with one-handed 16ths, okay? Because your arm's going to feel like it's going to fall off if you don't use proper technique with it, I promise. So you want to stay nice and controlled and relaxed. And remember that whole counterintuitive thing of the faster you go, the more relaxed you have to stay rather than trying harder or using more muscle, that kind of thing, okay? So counting 16ths. 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, E, and 2, and 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and stop. Okay, so those are your one-handed 16ths, still playing crossed if we're right-hand dominant. But now instead of counting 1 and 2, we're counting 1, E, and 2, okay? That's really important because once you get it into your muscle memory of 8, I guarantee you playing one-handed 16ths is going to kind of trick your brain a little bit because you're so used to... So the tendency is even when you go to 16ths, it's... where that's really not where it's supposed to be placed. It's supposed to be placed at... Right? So you want to make sure you count your syllables until you've got it into muscle memory. Then you can just groove with it. Okay, so you can practice the same patterns, 8th notes or 16th notes. So it kind of opens up basically what I'm trying to do in this lesson video is open up that page of those quarter note and rock patterns for people and kind of take the ceiling off of it. Because if you already know how to count your 8th notes and your quarter notes and you already know how to place those within the bass drum and the snare, 2 and 4 doesn't change, at least for now. We're just playing those 2 and 4. Like I said earlier, you can start to add ghost notes and stuff, but that's we'll do in another lesson video. But we call that our backbeat. That's what everyone's clapping to in church and concerts, that kind of thing. Now, we all know as drummers, you've always got those few people in a crowd that are clapping opposite from everyone else, right? Well, and I don't really have a good explanation for that other than what they're doing is they're feeling quarter notes of 1 and 3. They're feeling the bass drum rather than feeling the backbeat of the snare. So they're clapping on 1 and 3 while everyone else is clapping on 2 and 4. Right? So that where people clap at, that's 2 and 4, and that's your backbeat. That's where the snare goes, okay? So nothing's changing with that. So that's your reliable kind of place where you can arrange things around. We arrange things around beat 1, but just for a reference point, you can always count that 2 and 4 is going to be on the snare for these patterns, okay? Then with single stroke 16ths, now it changes things a little bit, okay? Because and the reason being you playing single strokes is because 2's better than 1, right? You can go faster with 2 hands. You can play a little bit more relaxed with 2 hands than you can with 1 hand. Now, developing that good technique will allow you to still play, and that's Moeller technique. We'll get into that, but it's a drop, catch, drop, catch, or push. We call it push, pull. But what you're doing is you're letting the stick fall, and then on the way back up, you're doing another stroke. That's why you see my wrist kind of rocking in that motion, but I'm still hitting the tip of the stick on each stroke. It will also give your patterns a different feel and a different sound because you're accenting the downbeats. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that kind of thing. So that's with one-handed 16ths. Single stroke 16ths will allow you to go faster, but you don't want to practice them fast at first because the coordination part is going to completely change from when you're playing crossed or from then playing open with one hand, where one hand is playing all the ride pattern. Now you have to engage two hands to do it, okay? Called single strokes, and we're playing 16ths. So that's why they're referred to as single stroke 16ths. So the same exact pattern that we just played, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Now we're going to play it this way. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So I'm just bringing my right hand over for 2 and 4. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E. Now we put 1 and 3 with it. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. Okay, so in the way, and I know I just kind of jumped into putting the bass drum in there without counting it off. So to start the pattern, you know that your right hand is still going to stack with the bass drum on beat 1. 1, E, and So you're going to end on that left of the before beat 2 comes for your right hand again. 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and And I know this is slow, but that's how you want to practice it at first till you get it into your muscle memory. Motion of getting used to moving your right hand back and forth for 2 and 4 with single stroke 16s. But as you can see there, you can play to faster tempos because now you're using 2 hands rather than 1, right? Because you can only max out at a certain speed with 1 hand. But you don't want to blast right to like, how fast can I play single stroke 16ths right away? Because that motion is so important to understand of what note value is falling on which hand, how you're moving your right hand back and forth for 2 and 4, and where your bass drum comes into the equation, okay? But starting your pattern, if you were just to count off 1, 2, 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, E, and 2, that's how you start it. Okay, so those are single stroke 16ths, and like I said, the reason being you can play faster that way, a little bit more relaxed because you're using 2 hands rather than 1, instead of playing one-handed 16ths. Another cool thing about that is then you can split your hands up between the ride and the hi-hat and come back and forth between the ride for your 2 and 4. Now your right hand comes back and forth between the ride while your left hand stays on the hat. For instance, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 So that's kind of the cool part about it is once you get it into your muscle memory, it's easy to do 16th note, single stroke, 16th fills, because your hands are already moving in that up-down motion. It's all just up-down motion. We're just controlling that up-down motion, but it's learning how to, what we call orchestrate it around the kit, moving your hands around the kit and orchestrating it around where you're putting that sticking and those note values, okay? So you've got 8th notes, one-handed 16ths, single strokes, back to 8s, can play in those 3 different ways. That's why I say all my students, regardless of the page, I have them practice those 3 different ways, because depending on what the bass drum pattern is for those different patterns, it's going to stack differently with either your right, or if you're playing 16ths, one-handed 16ths, or if you're playing single-stroke 16ths, okay? So for instance, now we've got the 1 and 3 pattern, right? Pattern number 3 from your page, I believe, Andrew, but our second pattern that I was counting as our second pattern for today. 1 and 3, 1 and 3, right? So with 8th notes, that's what it would sound like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now let's try it with 16th notes. Just count your syllables and play it slow, okay? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 3 1 and 3 1 and 3 1 and 3 1 E and a 2 and E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 and E and a 4 E and a. Okay? So, but you can see more notes are passing by up here before we get to those quarters and 8th notes down here on the bass drum and the snare, right? Okay? So then single stroke 16ths, watch how this is now changes the coordination part of it in the brain. That's why I have all my students do it this way, because depending on your sticking, your note values in the bass drum and the snare, all those different things, the same pattern can coordinationally, or independence, we use the word independence as drummers, but you can think coordination. Coordinationally, it feels completely different depending on where you're putting, what type of sticking you're using and where you're putting your accents, okay? So with single strokes now, same bass drum pattern of 1 and 3, 1 and 3, okay? We're going to start it with 1 and 3. Now if you watch closely, it still stacks with your right hand. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. 1 E and a 2 E and 3. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. 1 E and a 2 and E and a 4 and a 1 E and a 2 and E and a 4. 1 and 3. 1 So see, then you can just split your hands up to the right and hi-hat and play the same exact patterns. It'll help you with your kit control, K-I-T, kit control, getting your hands around from surface to surface without knocking your stick, tripping yourself up, or, you know, needing that free hand at the right time, but you don't because your sticking is off or you haven't figured out your sticking yet, that kind of thing. It's really important to be, you know, deliberate about how you kind of approach it. Have fun too, of course. Have fun. Explore the instrument, freestyle. Figure out how this different sounds work. How to get your hand from surface to surface in a smart way. Of how you can get from one ride to this crash to the next crash to the other crash to the other ride. That kind of thing. Be smart about how you get around your kit, and then also using that technique once you get to that surface to get those exact type of figures out, and so that way it sounds nice and consistent every time you play it that way. Okay. Now, our third and final pattern of 1, 3, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That's with 8 notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay. Now let's do it with 16th notes. So remember, the last two of these patterns, number 1 is our primary pattern. It's always referred to our primary pattern. That's the first pattern we all learn. That's the groove right there. And the more that you play it, the more you realize how just integral and how important that one groove is. It really is. Like, some people have mastered that one groove and made entire careers out of playing nothing but that one groove. Like AC/DC is an example, or some of those old classic rock drummers, that kind of stuff, where that's all they play. Maybe they play some eighth notes in the bass drum here and there, but that's all they play, and they've made tons of hit records and entire careers out of playing one pattern. No joke. So, but that's why I say you can work on that same pattern for years and years and years to get your feel down, to work on your technique with it, to get the flow of it, to get your phrasing, your feel, your emotion into that pattern. That's the part that the development takes, Yeah, can you sit there and physically play the pattern? Sure. A lot of people can do that pretty quick, but can you make it feel good? It's what we say, can you make booties shake with it? Can you get people to dance with it? Can you get people to clap on 2 and 4? Or maybe 1 and 3 if they don't know where to clap at. Sorry, it's always funny to drummers when you have that happen. But the whole point being, does it feel good to the audience? Does it feel good to the listener? So that they can move and groove with it with you, so that your emotion and your feel is coming out. Because think about it like speaking through your instrument. If you're cluttered up, or you're like, whoa, what did you just say, Blake? I don't know. It was chaos, kind of like, right? It's the same idea of, it's like, whoa, dude, you're shouting and mumbling at me. I don't know what you're saying, man. Same idea. But if I'm very clear with my instruction, then you can understand me, right? Lindsay and Andrew, can you understand what I'm saying? Right, so you get the point, right? But there's a big difference between clutter, chaos, and organized chaos, that kind of thing. We want to play in an organized fashion, and I promise you, if you learn how to feel that pulse, be consistent within that pulse, learn your different subdivisions or note values within that pulse, everything's going to sound much cleaner and much more organized, even when you do freestyle, okay? So then the joy can be even more, because the more stuff you know how to play in an organized fashion, the more fun the instrument is. And it just becomes more and more and more fun the more you learn how to play on it, okay? So that's why for those 3 patterns, kind of just giving drummers an idea, first of all, of how to count them, how to start the patterns, and how to know your note differences between playing 8th notes up here and playing 16th notes up here, whether you're playing single strokes or one-handed 16ths, okay? So I practice those 3 different patterns in all 3 of those different ways. That way you're getting used to what it feels like to not only use your motion and your technique with it, but then also how it's going to stack with your bass drum. Because your left hand is going to, like I said, be reliable on 2 and 4. It's just the bass drum that we're playing, changing the accents of where we're putting them. And they're just 8th notes for now. So we're not playing anything crazy or any 16th notes yet, or any syncopated patterns or linear patterns. So that's why these are called stacked patterns, Andrew and other people out there. They're called stacked because they're written on top of each other, the note values are, and you're stacking different parts or different voices of the kit at the same time, okay? Syncopated is where some notes don't fall together. Linear is where nothing falls together. So it's only one limit at a time. And that's what Drew's a master of. That's why everything sounds so clean that he plays, because he's playing a lot of stuff that's linear. When you play linear style, you're only playing one voice of the kit at a time, so everything sounds much more articulate and organized, because instead of having multiple, all this note, being real notey, we call it, and there's a difference between playing linear, being notey with linear, and being notey with just a lot of sounds happening at the same time on the kit, that kind of idea. But I'll give you an example of a linear, so you can still play like, but in a linear fashion, which would be, right hand out anytime you're playing the kick or the snare. But that's called linear, okay? So 3 different styles of playing. And so for today, we're working on our stacked patterns. So stack it, 8th notes, 16th notes, single stroke 16ths. Make sure you count your note values because, like I said, once you get 8th notes into muscle memory, then you start playing 16ths. It's like, whoa, oh, your 2 and 4 wants to come in a little bit early because you're used to 1 and 2 rather than 1 knee and a 2, right? So it's just learning how to kind of feel the differences, but work with them in slow and medium tempos first. You don't want to try to max out as fast as you can. I mean, sure, maybe you do for some fun, but if you practice that way, technique is gonna go out the window. You're gonna tighten up. You're gonna tighten and think, oh, more muscle, harder, right? That kind of thing, rather than using your technique and relaxation with it. Right? Sounds totally different then. Right? And you can injure yourself 100%. And all the shock goes up into your hands and your joints and your tendons and your ligaments, rather than the stick absorbing the shock with that bounce. See, so now the stick is taking all the shock, rather than my arm and my hand taking all the shock from a closed and tight grip and guiding the front of the stick down. Big difference, huge difference. So not only will it make your longevity of playing longer and easier for you, it'll prevent injuries, and it'll make you sound better, promise. And you can play longer, and your endurance will really improve too over time because you can play longer and faster without getting tired because you're using smaller movements and smaller muscle groups rather than big muscles. The bigger the muscles you use and the larger the motions you use, the more tired you're going to get more easily. Okay? So just think of that, as you go through it. Have fun. You can practice these on a pad too. So you don't have to have a full drum set to practice these patterns. You can practice them just, my pad's over there. But just pretend that I have a practice pad on my snare, okay? So just stomp on the ground. So for your 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Same thing, it's just I'm playing with my hands open and stomping on the ground. Right back into it. So you can still practice it on one surface even if you don't have a full kit. You can still practice all these patterns, or 16ths. That would be one-handed 16ths and then single stroke 16ths. Okay, so you can still do it on a practice pad. You don't have to have a full kit in order to do it. But hopefully this helps some guys with kind of learning your crossed motion versus your open motion, and then being able to get some of these different patterns out on the bass drum, because that's all that we're changing is where we're placing our bass drum accents with these. But these patterns are famous patterns. You'll hear them in everything from AC/DC to Michael Jackson to, they're hip-hop tunes. They're in everything. So learning how to place those note values in a consistent place, and I know it's a repetitious pattern, but try not to get lost in, where did beat 1 go, or where am I at within my pattern, because we don't want to just count what we're playing as far as our note values. We want to keep track of how long we've been playing those note values, and that's what bars are, or measures. So when you hear people refer to how many bars they've been playing or how many measures they've been playing, it refers to the same concept. That's keeping track of how long you've been playing the pattern. Not just counting your note values, but how long you've been playing those note values. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. But for instance, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4, 3 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 7 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 8, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's what I mean by keeping track of bars. So on each new bar, I'm just counting that bar number. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? So that's what I mean by feeling and keeping track of your bars. Then you can start to add drum fills into those bars once you learn how to feel bars, okay? And we'll put that into another video. But work with that technique, up-down motion, playing the back of the stick, let the stick do the work for you, know your differences between your 8th note feel and your 16th note feel, right, okay? And then single stroke. Alright, buddies, dudes, dudettes, everyone out there that this might help. So, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. But that'll give you a sense of what they're supposed to sound like, in addition to how to count them, and then how you can take something that's written a certain way and adapt it so that you can practice other skills with that same exact pattern. And that's what I mean to referring going back and forth between 8th notes, one-handed 16ths, and single stroke 16ths. So just because it's written one way on the page doesn't mean you can't practice it 3 different ways. Does that make sense? Hopefully, okay? So, love you guys. Hopefully that's a helpful video for some of you out there. And I appreciate this community so much. So I love giving back, and it's all cyclical. It's all cyclical. So that's kind of where my passion and joy lies, is passing it on to others so they can use it in their own lives to have fun and share their joy with the instrument, and then pass it on to others. It's like the butterfly effect kind of thing. So anything I can do to help anyone out there. Am I the best drummer by any means? No. I'm an average player, okay? I know that. But the consistency is what's there, and that's what needs to be there. And it's, you can have a lot of chops and play notey stuff, have fun with it, but I guarantee you what gets you hired as a drummer is consistency and being able to groove. It's not, oh, how fast can he play double bass drum pedal? Or how fast can he play 32nd notes and play notes everywhere and clutter up all the space? That's not what I get hired for. I get hired for my feel and my consistency. So that's why I say it's like you can work on that one primary pattern in a lifetime just to get the feel down, right? And to work on your feel and your motion and your technique, adding embellishments to it, that kind of stuff. All right, guys? So happy drumming. Have a great rest of your weekend. Love all ya. And hopefully this helps some people. Take care, guys.